Madlozi yakhuluma nawe.
Thokozani, hello everyone and welcome to the one-on-one sessions with Coco Musori, and I'm your host Coco. I'm giving you guys tips, lessons and teachings on everything spirituality. Okay, so today I want us to talk about generational curses, right? And my lord, I want us to talk about generational curses. I want us to understand exactly what is a generational curse, okay? And then I want us to look at what are the causes of generational curse, how it impacts our lives, and then how exactly is it that generational curses can be fixed or tackled or removed in a sense, so we can actually live in a life where we can prosper, succeed, and have good things in our lives in a sense. So starting with the video one, I want to define what exactly is a generational curse, right? So the first thing I want us to understand is that a generational curse is a negative effect on a person's life caused by the actions of their ancestors, okay? So these are not actions done by their ancestors in their spiritual state, but rather actions done by our ancestors while they were still alive, in their time, like when they were still living life and whatnot, right? So these are the actions of their doings. This can be like manifested from their behaviors, it can be manifested from their choices, their beliefs, their practices, and even their sins. Even the tiniest thing can actually generate or rather cause a generational curse amongst the bloodline within the family, right? And also another thing I noted down, so in turn we can say that it is the consequences of the actions of the people in our bloodlines before they passed away, okay? So let's say, for example, a certain ancestor in their time decided to be the kind of person who tricks people in a way they can actually get what they want, okay? No matter how tiny that is, that can actually manifest or cause a generational curse. In the family, you'd find out because of the actions of this particular person or this particular ancestor when he or she was alive, the people in the family actually have to suffer from poverty at the end of the day because of him. But that is not the only definition of a generational curse, because there are two types of generational curses. Firstly, being done by the actions of the ancestors when they were alive, but secondly being the consequences of certain muti placed on a family member in their time of being alive by another person. So this is a generational curse that is manifested from a curse from other people. For example, like we all know witchcraft is alive and whatnot, and we're getting voodoo fight left, right, and center. So that is normal for us. But certain voodoos or certain curses that are placed on us are actually curses. These people are not trying to curse us alone, but they're trying to curse us, our children, and then this actually follows to the next generation and whatnot. So this particular curse or hex that has been placed on one of our ancestors actually manifests or rather goes on throughout the bloodlines and throughout the lineages, and actually affects the people in that particular family for a very long time, okay? But since we've actually defined what generational curses are, I want us to look at the causes of generational curse. So I'm just gonna note down, like, say all the causes that I noted down and go back and explain them to you guys one by one, so you guys can have an understanding on what kind of curses are they and how do they affect us in a way. So the first one is abandoned ancestors. The second one is the use of dark magic. The third one is wotwala. The fourth one is jealousy amongst the ancestors when they were alive. The fifth one is changing of surnames, names, origin, and culture. The sixth one is tainting the bloodline and murder. And the seventh one is behaviors passed down from generation to generation. And also the last one, like I said, it is the family being bewitched by people, in a sense, when they were alive in their particular time. So looking at all these things one by one. All right, so looking at the cause of generational curses, the first one is abandoned ancestors. So there are many things that actually caused most of our grandparents to actually abandon their ancestors, and most of these things I won't really say what they are to blame for it, because there were a lot of consequences. Bungoma, Bungaka, all these traditional things we were forced, or rather our ancestors, our grandparents were forced to leave them behind and actually adapt to a new type of religion, whatnot, right? So in a sense, abandoned ancestors can actually cause generational curses, because the fact that certain cultural practices were abandoned at a certain stage, or rather at a certain time in our lives, can actually in a way manifest ancestral blockages, or rather ancestral generational curses in a sense. Number 2 is the use of dark magic. So for some people, you are not supposed to be using dark magic, or in a sense the ancestors were not supposed to be using dark magic. So one of the people in our lineages may have fell into the dark side and whatnot, so that actually caused generational curses for some people within that bloodline, right? Number 3 is wotwala. Okay, so as most of you guys know, wotwala can be done to actually get power, to actually get money, to be wealthy, and all those kind of things. So there are a lot of reasons why people twala in this world there. So wotwala is actually sort of like a dark ritual in a sense. So this dark ritual actually like conjures up certain negative entities or energies and whatnot. So this particular entities or energies that are conjured actually manifest or rather cause generational curses amongst the family at a later age, at a later stage, right? Number 4 is jealousy amongst the ancestors. So in our culture, one thing that I know about the African culture is that it is all about peace. We are taught to be peaceful with our neighbors, our friends, and whatnot, right? So you might find out in a family there was jealousy that manifested amongst the siblings and whatnot, and that in turn caused generational curses for the family in the bloodlines that are yet to come, right? Number 5 is changing of surnames, names, origin, and culture. Okay, so with the changing of names, surnames, origins, and cultures, this was something that was done mostly during the apartheid times. A lot of people had to change their names to make them sound a bit Western, and the reason being to get jobs and whatnot, to be able to get paid a better working wage and whatnot, while others they were running away from certain family conflicts, usually in royal families. When these certain people ran away from their families and whatnot, they had to change their names and whatnot, and even their practices, just so they can survive in that particular point in time. So like I said, Leona, it's not really something we can actually blame our ancestors for, but in a sense, Leona, it does manifest, or rather does have an impact in causing generational curses amongst family members and bloodlines. Thokozani. Number 6 is the tainting of bloodlines and murder. So there are a lot of actions, or rather a lot of things can be done by people, or have been done by certain people in our bloodlines that have tainted our bloodlines in a sense. Let's say for example, you've murdered somebody, like okay, an ancestor in the family has murdered someone in cold blood. The spirit of that person will haunt that person that had committed the crime, but Lord, at the end of the day, every single person within that bloodline can be affected by that particular action done by this particular ancestor or person who was in this particular bloodline at a certain time. The 6th point is behaviors passed down from generation to generation. So these behaviors, the way that they are passed down is done in so many different ways. So certain people in the family can be very toxic. Their toxic behaviors are things that they project onto the next person and also projected onto their children, and the children actually develop this kind of behavior, and for them it's okay. There's nothing toxic about it. It's how we were raised. It's how things were done in our time. So this is something it is breakable easily, but not really easily, but like the whole thing, a person's behavior needs to be changed. One person needs to stand out and say, you know what, I'm not gonna be like this. I'm gonna behave in a different way. I'm gonna manage things in a different way, in a sense. And the last thing, which is a family being bewitched. This also goes hand in hand with the second definition that I told you guys about, which is when a curse has been placed on a certain family member, and that curse actually follows the family throughout the generations that are yet to come, right? So looking at all these particular things, I want to talk about how each and every one of them can impact the family, or rather the bloodline, to actually manifest or cause generational curses, right? So for this one, I'm going to need my notes because I did not memorize any of these things. So in terms of abandoned ancestors, I noted down that is the inability to the impact of it is the inability to connect with the ancestors. So let's say, for example, like I said, this is not something we can really blame our ancestors for, but it has impacted our bloodlines very badly and whatnot, right? So in a sense, you'd find out, okay, in a family there was bungoma, bungak, and all those kind of stuff. Then at a certain stage, there was a lot of colonization, a lot of indoctrination, all those kind of things. Certain people in the family said, you know what, let's abandon this tradition that we have practiced for a very long time just so we can survive, so just so we can live, right? So once they abandon the ancestors, obviously they're no longer going to partner, they're no longer going to practice certain traditional rituals and all those kind of things. So in turn, what happens, because some of the ancestors decide to move away, they move back, they're not able to communicate with you, so they will not try to communicate with you. And this goes on for generation, because when you're born and you are taught what this is the way of life, this is the tradition that we follow right now, regardless of what we followed back then, this is the new way of life right now. Obviously that is something that you're going to adapt, and that's something that your children are going to adapt, and so on and so on. So yes, there might be that particular child or this particular person in the family who says, I'm going to break away from this and return back to my roots. Obviously when they return back to their roots, it's going to be a very difficult transition to make, because understand that some of the ancestors are already angry, some of the ancestors have already turned their backs against this bloodline. So connecting with the ancestors is something what is going to be very difficult to be done by this particular person who's trying to go back into the roots, because of the impact, or rather the effects of what has been done by the people in the bloodlines a long time ago, right? Number 2, the ancestors refusing to cooperate with the family. So when this is done, like when the ancestors turn their backs on a certain family, on the family, that is when they will no longer cooperate with you guys. Even when someone in the family decides, or I want to go back to my root, getting the ancestors to come back to you and communicate with you the way that they did in the later time when tradition was actually something that was followed accordingly and properly, that's something where it's gonna be difficult, because already the ancestors are angry, right? Number 3, ancestral blockages are also a major impact of abandoned ancestors. When this is done, let's say for example in this particular stage, these people decide, or certain people in our bloodline decide, okay, we're gonna abandon the ancestors just so we can survive, or for whatever reason that maybe, there are going to be blockages that are put in this family by their ancestors. So ancestral blockages, I think they are sort of like a curse from the ancestors, a generational curse put on the family by the ancestors. Okay, so in a sense, there are certain rituals that need to be done in order to bring the ancestors back, to ask the ancestors for forgiveness and whatnot. So these rituals can be complicated, or rather can differ depending on what kind of ancestors you have, how they cooperate, and how they would want you to actually reconcile with them and start living with them in a peaceful and harmonious way, right? So with the second impact, with the second cause, which is the use of dark magic, the impacts that it has on generations and people in the family is that number 1, spiritual darkness following the family throughout the generation. Like for example, like I did mention, some families are not supposed to use dark magic, because that is not how the principles of the family of the ancestors was from the get-go, right? So when someone actually decides to move into the dark side, obviously certain ancestors are going to punish that particular person, and that punishment can actually go through all the generations that are yet to come and whatnot, right? So another thing that happens, the impact of it, there's a lot of spiritual darkness in this person's life or in this family lineage and whatnot. And with this spiritual darkness, there's a lot of things that can be done, like that can occur, or rather that can be put as caused by the spiritual darkness, like poverty, failure, being cruel, there's so many things. So there's a lot of spiritual darkness in the family throughout every single generation. Number 2, constant desire to harm others. The minute you actually do something bad, you will actually become like that thing, a bloodlust in a sense, like constantly wanting to do this bad thing. And even in the next generation, even if the child is born innocent, the fact that is the generational curse that is put on this family, then automatically even this child who's innocent will later on develop this desire to harm other people, because that is a curse that has been put on this family due to the actions of one particular ancestor who chose to actually use dark magic to harm people and to hurt people and whatnot, right? And the third impact, spiritual, I'm talking about, like, the third impact is spiritual curses from your ancestors and other people's ancestors. So the curses, this generational curses that are there in the family due to the use of dark magic, are not only there from your ancestors or from the people in that bloodline, but also there are curses that are there from other people's ancestors, the people that were harmed by this particular person or this particular ancestor who chose to go into the dark route, in a sense. The third cause, which is Wutwala, the impact of Wutwala in terms of spiritual curses, number one, is being tormented by evil spirits and entities. Like I said, Wutwala you actually conjure up certain negative entities and spirits. And when these certain entities and spirits are conjured, they can be conjured for a lot of things, for wealth, for power, and all those kind of things. Obviously, spirits do not die, right? So you as a person, as an ancestor, the person died in that particular time after doing all those things and receiving every single thing that they wanted from this particular spirit, but that spirit still lingers. So obviously this spirit will continue to be within that particular family, and it will torment these people. Because let's say, for example, a person so there are certain things that they are told to do, right? And this person does those things the way that they need to do them. When they pass on, this thing is going to be within the family. And as long as the people do not do exactly what this thing wants them to do, then obviously they will be tormented by this evil spirit. They will be like possessed by this evil spirit in a sense. Number two, I mentioned poverty, because this is actually something was conjured up for wealth in a sense. Let's say, for example, it was conjured up for wealth. Obviously, when you're doing what it wants you to do, you will get the wealth that you want. But when you don't, then you'll be destined for poverty. So this particular entity needs to be cast away, needs to be chased away spiritually. And once it's chased away, then there will be luck and prosperity within the family the way that they were supposed to be in the beginning. Number three is failure, a lot of failure in the family. Number four is death following the family. So like Wutwala, there are certain things if you twala with them, then you're gonna have to sacrifice a person. Like it could be something that should be done on a yearly basis, on 10-year basis, depending on what kind of contract these people signed with this particular entity. So yes, once this is done, then obviously even if the person who actually twala to begin with passes away, then there still needs to be a sacrifice. So death will actually follow this family. Let's say, for example, someone in the family twala with a snake or whatever it is they twalad with name, then once they pass away, then this particular entity will say, well, at a specific age, the male child in the family is supposed to die. So this is something that occurs over and over again, and this is something it occurs a lot in a lot of African families. You find in a particular family, they know at a specific age the male child is gonna die, or at a specific age this is gonna happen in the family, or at a specific age, or not really in a specific age, or rather all the females cannot get married and all those kind of stuff. It's just this kind of rules, or rather curses, that actually follow the family throughout the entire generations and whatnot, right? And the last one, no progress. There is no progress in this family. There is no change. If, let's say, for example, people are born in this very harsh environment, they will continue to live in this environment. They will bear kids in this environment. Their kids will bear kids within this environment. There will be no change, no progress whatsoever, because this is the curse that has been put in the family by the entity not to begin with. So the fourth cause, which is being jealousy amongst the ancestors, the impact of it is, number one, hatred among siblings in every generation. There's a lot of family feuds. There are a lot of fights within the families. The siblings are always fighting. The siblings are always attacking each other with muti and all those kind of things. That can actually be called a curse as well, because that is something that has been manifested through the ancestors, through a certain ancestor, or a certain family in the lineage. The ancestors, so like the spirits actually like punish this particular family and say, well, if that is how you're gonna go about everything, then this is how it's gonna be throughout the entire generations. And until someone actually steps up and say, well, we're going to break this kind of curse, then this is something that is going to continue to happen over and over again. The second impact of this is family fighting over wealth with each other. So one of the most common things, they are fighting over wealth, right? Let's say, for example, even if the wealth is not even that much, like people fight over the tiniest things, the tiniest crumb of bread, because of this particular curse that has been put on the family to actually continue the family feuds and whatnot, right? So the fifth cause of spiritual generational curses, which is being changing of surnames, names, origin, and culture name. So the impact of that one is being lost from your ancestors. So when a person changes their names, their surname, their culture, their origin, then obviously some ancestors will not be able to locate this person, because in terms of connecting with the ancestors, there are certain things what they are done by each family in a sense. There are certain totems that are actually acknowledged, there are certain rituals that are actually done and whatnot. So the minute a name is changed, a surname is changed, the origin is changed, the culture is changed, the minute those things are all put aside by one certain ancestor and then followed through by all the other ancestors, all the other people that were born from this particular ancestors, then this particular lineage will actually be lost to the ancestors, and that actually causes a lot of generational causes, because the ancestors will not be able to find you, the ancestors will not be able to communicate with you guys, and the ancestors will not be able to give you the blessings that you need. So in turn, most of these people in this kind of situation actually suffer from a lot of bad luck, a lot of bad karma and whatnot, because of this curse, because of the fact that they left behind certain things that are very important in their culture or in their family bloodline for their own particular reason. So meaning what, when a family changes their names, surnames, origin, and culture, this they need to inform their ancestors and give them a reason as to why this is done. For those that do not do that or have not done that, then yes, the ancestors will not be able to find you. So that means that whoever decides to actually try and break this particular curse will need to locate their ancestors, introduce themselves properly to their ancestors, and try to form a connection, or rather a bond with their ancestors the way that they were supposed to from the beginning, right? The second impact is never obtaining ancestral blessings. So of course, when the ancestors cannot find you, you cannot get their blessings. That is just straight to the point. I don't feel like I need to explain that any further, right? Number 3, connecting with the wrong spirits, because every single name, every single surname has a meaning to every single bloodline. So if, let's say for example, you decide to leave all those things behind as a person, then automatically when you connect with the ancestors, you will connect with the wrong ancestors, and that's just going to bring you a lot of bad luck, because the ancestors will know that you're not from their bloodline, so they have no reason to give you blessings, they have no reason to accept you as their own, because you are not their own in a sense. So number 6, the cause, which is being tainted bloodline and murder, the impacts are bloodlust. So let's say for example, this certain ancestor decides to kill a person, so obviously if this action actually causes a curse within the family or within the lineage or the bloodline, then in this particular family, you'd find out all the children actually end up committing this particular same crime over and over and over again. It's like a calling to them. It's like something that they are drawn to do, whether they want to or they don't. Okay. And number 2, the second impact is visited by evil spirits. So automatically when you taint your bloodline or commit a crime such as murder and whatnot, obviously you are inviting negative spirits, you're inviting evil spirits. So these evil spirits will torment you, will visit you on a regular basis. You'll get haunted by these spirits over and over again, and these spirits can be spirits of people that were harmed by people in that bloodline in a specific time and whatnot, because like I said, spirits don't die. They will continue to linger around the family on and on and on and on and whatnot, right? The third impact is poverty as well. Obviously, a tainted bloodline will never bear beautiful fruits, will never bear digestible fruits in a sense. So obviously, the family will live in poverty, the family will live in failure. There will just be a lot of bad things that will happen within the family. And the fourth one is witchcraft. At the end of the day, this family bloodline will be sort of like pushed or rather linked into committing witchcraft and all those kind of things, because there are different ways in which a person can be murdered spiritually and also physically. So let's say for example, the ancestor decided to commit this crime spiritually, then obviously that is a dark omen that will be put on the family for a very long time, and automatically everyone within that bloodline will be called into practicing dark magic, will be called into practicing witchcraft and whatnot. That itself can also be claimed or rather put as a generational curse as well, right? So that is also something that needs to be broken in a sense. And the seventh cause, which is behavior passed on from generation to generation, the impact is toxic traits from the get-go, from the beginning up until the end. You'd find, like I said, this is where a certain behavior of an ancestor. This is a behavior that they project on everyone around them, including their kids. And for the kids, get that thing out, this is normal. Okay, this is how we're raised, this is how we're gonna raise our kids, and so on and so on and so on. So these are toxic traits that occurs within the family. But the good thing about this is that it is not that spiritual. It is more physical and mental and emotional. So it can be tackled in a physical, mental, and emotional way. One person can say, you know what, I am not gonna continue with this kind of behavior. Okay, you decide, okay, I'm gonna be a different person. I'm gonna raise my kids differently. I'm gonna raise my kids in different principles, and I'm gonna learn to let go of the toxic traits that I was born with, the toxic traits that were there within my family bloodline, so I can be a better person, so I can actually bring light to better, or rather bring life to better children or better behaving infants, in a sense. Then the 8th one, which is the family being bewitched. So when this kind of thing is done, like I said, this is a curse that is put by another person onto a certain family member, and this certain curse continues to follow the family from generation to generation. The first one is poverty. Obviously, whenever someone bewitches a person, they want to make sure what their life is a living hell. So obviously poverty is going to be one of the impacts that it has on people's lives. Secondly, failure, constant failure. Regardless of how bright the future looks for certain children within that family, they'll always end up failing and always end up living under harsh circumstances and harsh lives at the end of the day. Number 3, darkness in the family. The darkness that is in the family is darkness that has been put by this particular person who uses muti, and this darkness continues to follow the family on and on and on, regardless of when the generation is. That every generation within the family actually goes through all this darkness and whatnot, right? So with all this being said, in terms of curing or clearing generational curses, obviously the first thing you need to do is change your behavior, change your mindset, change how you see the world, and change how you behave to the world on its own. Secondly, you need to make sure that you find the root cause of the spiritual or rather generational curse, and look at it in ways in which you're gonna get rid of it. It can be through rituals, it can be through talking to the ancestors, whatever method you're given. These are things you can be given by a healer, guidance you can be given by someone who guide a demon, whatnot. But whatever it is, you need to go about it the right way so you can be able to clear whatever curse it is. Because I can't say, well, you need to do this for this, can you do that for that? Because every single generational curse has its own way of actually, everyone has their own way of actually removing it, and it depends on how your ancestors actually prefer it to be removed. Anyways, that is it for me, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this session. Have a beautiful one. Thokozani. Bye bye.